of Houston, what we can do, who we are, and how we care. You know, I think one of the things that I really appreciated is also Vicky Holub, CEO of Oxy. Oxy is represented here. But I think she was very candid about when she started her career, how she was so proud of being in oil and gas, and only much later on in her career she understood the impact of what oil and gas was doing. And I think a lot of us feel that same way. It's like suddenly we are the villains a little bit, but we actually thought we were doing a lot of good in the world, and I still think we do. But it's about how you can transform and stay true to who you are, but still make sure that you take care of your impact.
And I think, we talked about it looks so hard to do this, but it really wasn't, because the city's already doing all the hard things. And, there's all this innovation that's happening. There's this history of what we've done for the world with oil and gas, and then all the new startups that are happening now for climate tech and energy innovation. And all we did was just turn the lights on, make sure there was a streaming channel, and allow them to have a shared calendar so we could all go experience it. So I think Houston does the hard things. We just made sure that everyone was able to see a little bit of what we're doing.
Yeah, and look, I said it this morning, I think that we don't shy away from doing difficult things in the city. I mean, we've put men and women on the moon. We solved COVID. Most people don't realize that, the innovations came from Houston, Texas. And I love Steven Kleinberg, the local sociologist at Rice University, who retired recently, but he said, Houston is where America is going to sort itself out. And that is such a reflection of all the diversity that's in this room and all of the diversity across our great city. And I think it's kind of weird, honestly, I just have to say. Like, it's Friday the 13th, and we didn't get a hurricane.
Yep.
Let's get an applause for that one. And we had the presidential debate in the same week. And
there you go.
Right, and we celebrated, 9/11. And so it was quite a week. This is why you'll see that we're in shoes that are more comfortable, because the feet hurt. But we want to thank all of you for being a part of this, and we'll talk later about what 2025 has in store. But with
I want to thank the volunteers.
Yes, that's right. Let's thank the volunteers. Where are our volunteers?
Everybody. Like, you have your jobs, your careers, your companies, your family, and you've been here helping us with every single thing. I mean, for Energy Tech Nexus, our grand opening, we have such a small team, and we crowdfunded and crowdsourced everything, and everybody was like, I'll do a panel for you, and the other one like, oh, I'll bring you the companies, and I'll bring the art, and I think the whole week has been like that,
Well, even today, we have some live music, and the Energy Anthem was on our website. It was something that we kind of had put together. I say we, part of the people that are working with us. And one of our volunteers up there who does our visual art graphics, I'm calling Peter out from Alpha Chimp, he said, I can get somebody to come sing that for you. And just saying, I want to come, I want to be a part of this. So that's what the whole week's been about.
Absolutely. And before we forget, so Peter is graphic recording. All of the beautiful graphic recording
Amazing.
You saw, I know, is outside. And we will be giving that to the Energy Tech Nexus to hang.
Thank you.
In,
we have too much
walls.
space. We need a lot of art, and amazing. And it's
right.
so fitting. Thank you. It's been already showcased during our grand opening, so
Yes.
it fits perfect,
Yeah.
the space. Thank you so much.
All right, well, let's get the party started, shall we?
Woohoo!
Okay. So I'm really, really thrilled to introduce to you today our keynote speaker, someone I met earlier this year. I actually sat on a panel that was an all male panel, and myself in a pink dress in Dallas, Texas. It was awesome. And I met Jim, and I was instantly excited about Jim because Jim's passion for knowledge and education is tremendous. He's written a book called Education. That's right. Education is Freedom, and it's such a powerful read because it speaks to what we need. And he's going to talk a bit about perception and perspective. But he's also got some amazing stories about himself and his journey from the outhouse to the penthouse. Please give a warm welcome to Jim Keyes.
There we go. We've been all week. I hope you've had a great week. We've spent the entire week talking about how to do things that are hard, right? So what is the consummate expression of doing things hard? It started in 1962 down the street, Rice University, John F. Kennedy. I don't know if you remember this. I was just a little kid at the time. He said, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Now, 1962. This is where I lived. 3-room shack, Massachusetts. 3 rooms, not 3 bedrooms. Literally 3 rooms. Outhouse, she mentioned an outhouse. You can imagine what it's like having to trek like 30 yards through the snow in the middle of the night when you have to use the outhouse. Not a lot of fun. I was doing things hard. I didn't realize it. When you're a little kid, it's like, no big deal. It's just the way we live. But I was living there in 1969 when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and the Eagle basically landed on the moon. Now, I was actually at Boy Scout camp. And it was my first leadership experience in this Boy Scout Leaders program. And it was really a moving time for me because my first time I was actually leading a patrol up to the commissary to watch on a little black and white screen this amazing feat that would change the world. Now, little did I realize, going home to that little 3-room shack, that about 30 years later, I'd be on a stage with Buzz Aldrin in Washington, D.C., being honored at the same time that he was with 10 other distinguished Americans in an organization called the Horatio Alger Association. And I was able to stand on that stage and say, I am here today because of guys like this, who were ordinary guys that did extraordinary things. And I learned because of them that knowledge is the key to opportunity. That all I have to do is learn how to learn, and I too can be an astronaut. So I set out to be an astronaut. Well, I fell a little short. I'm a pilot today. I hang around with astronauts. A bunch of them are good friends. I do a lot of things with NASA and with space, but I fell a little short of that goal. But I was able to accomplish some pretty interesting things. From that beginning, and what I realized eventually is that beginning actually was an advantage. It gave me a realization that hard is good, that hard builds character, that hard makes you stronger, it builds resilience, it builds an intensity that allows you to deal with change and to deal with adversity. So I go into schools today and I talk to kids and that are living in pretty tough conditions, a lot tougher than I lived in back then. And I'm able to tell them, you don't realize it today, but the adversity that you're dealing with now is really your superpower. If you can leverage it, if you can keep your head up and use that as a strength, not as a weakness, not let other people put you in a box and tell you who you are and what you can do, because you can do anything. We're blessed to be in a country called the United States of America where we really can do anything. So I'd like to take you a little bit on my journey to share how all this happened. How did I get from that 3-room shack to have the privilege of being CEO of 7-Eleven or Blockbuster? Well, here's how. I started, believe it or not, I went to school, did all the normal things, college, learned that the harder I work, the more I study, the more I succeed, and I figured out how to learn. I wasn't really any smarter, in fact, probably not as smart as many of the kids in the room, but I knew I could outwork anybody. And so I worked at learning to learn. And it worked. So I got through high school, I got through college, I got into Columbia University for grad school, and here I am at Columbia, and I get an internship opportunity. All these, jobs on the wall, and one of them was Gulf Oil Corporation, and they wanted someone for an internship in Houston, Texas. And I said, yeah, I want to wear a cowboy hat. I want to go to Houston, Texas. A little kid from Massachusetts, what did I know? I'd never been outside of New England. So I took the opportunity and applied for the job. They said, oh, you're not qualified, you're not an engineer. And I spent an hour in my interview convincing them why a poli-sci major with no engineering degree was the right fit for Gulf, because their industry was changing. They had to do things that were hard, and that I had a different perspective that I could help. They bought it, and they hired me. They brought me down to Houston. So I get to the oil industry, and guess what happens? I realize, man, this is hard. Back in the day, this is a long time ago, crude oil was back at $7-8 a barrel or something like that, and Gulf and all the major oil companies were all reeling from the pain of these crappy crude oil prices, and crack spreads were negative at the refineries, and they were just losing a lot of money, and everybody was in despair. And so Gulf, in response to the need to change, guess what they did? Now, I ended up working for the CFO in the M&A group. So I guess they figured I couldn't break anything as a non-engineer going over there. And you can't imagine what they were trying to buy. Anybody want to guess? A company. They were trying to buy another company to diversify. Nope, not an ice company, but good guess. They tried to buy the Barnum and Bailey Circus. True story. I was doing the analysis. I'm like, what in the hell? Why are we trying to buy a circus? Have you lost your minds? But they needed diversification, and Barnum and Bailey was in trouble, and they had cash, and they said, let's go look at it. Now, they never did it, thank goodness, but they had very, very, very few people in this world know that Gulf actually looked at doing that acquisition. Well, then, a whole host of things happened. We tried to acquire City Service. It failed. It was a bad acquisition. Boone Pickens came in, made a run on Gulf. Carl Icahn came in. Somebody else made a run on City Service. Both companies were weakened. Chevron acquires Gulf, and Cities was broken up. City Service went half to Occidental Petroleum, and the downstream to 7-Eleven. Wait a minute. And guess who had been doing all the analysis of City Service downstream? With an Apple computer. They thought I was a genius. PCs had just come out. I wasn't a genius. I just bought a PC, this new thing, this new tool in the market. Change. All the old farts were sitting around with spreadsheets and eye shades trying to do this analysis, and I was whipping reports out in like record time. They literally thought I was a genius just because I used a new tool. And so that created an advantage. Then, guess what happens? Gulf is weakened. Boone Pickens comes up, scares everybody to death. Gulf merges with Chevron. I became part of the merger team. I'm just a kid because I had a PC. We were still doing punch cards, if you can believe it or not, at the time. And the Chevron guys came in and they were like, kid, we don't know how you got to this job, to be part of this merger team, because it was all vice presidents, all these, senior, very much older guys. I don't know. And they said, well, you're going to have to pay your dues here at Chevron. And I thought, oh boy, maybe not. Again, crisis occurs, but what the heck? I grew up with crisis, right? No big deal. Head up, work harder. Guess what happened? When one of the guys from Gulf decided that he was hired by the Southland Corporation to go because Southland had just acquired Citgo Petroleum, the downstream of City Service. They needed help from the industry. And he said, Jim, we want to hire you to come to Texas. And I was like, yes, finally. Because Gulf had me in Pittsburgh. I was like, yeah, it's a bait and switch. I thought I was going to get to go to Houston. You send me to Pittsburgh? Come on. So I finally get to come to Texas with the Southland Corporation, 7-Eleven. Now, I'm thinking, great. This is a great career move. I get to use my little PC. I get to do all this analysis of City Service, of Citgo, brand all the gasoline, and then guess what happens? Another crisis. 7-Eleven, Southland did a leverage buyout in 1987. If you're old enough to remember 1987, you'll remember something called Black Monday. They were trying to do a deal when the market collapsed. Instead of pulling the deal, they proceeded. Anybody think interest rates are high today? 17.5%. We borrowed money, $4.5 billion. Yeah, you can imagine. So it was just a matter of time. Now, 1991, 7-Eleven's bankrupt. Oh, man. So, still a kid, I go to the chairman of the company. That's not him. That's his dad, actually. Or I think that's his Uncle Johnny. But a guy named John Thompson, whose father started the Southland Company. I said, should I stay with the company? We're going through this change, crisis. They say convenience stores are going to go away. Everybody's open 24 hours. Everybody sells beer and cigarettes. Walmart is 50 cents less than our cost. Should I just find another career? And he said, Jim, now he's a Texan, so I've been learning to be a Texan. He goes, let me tell you what my daddy told me. He said, we started in 1927 on this, an ice dock in Oak Cliff, Texas, 12th Street. And he said, we sold blocks of ice to people for their refrigerator, for their ice box. The word refrigerator wasn't around. For their ice box, literally. And it's hard to imagine, but they mined it in the Great Lakes, carried it down the Mississippi, wagoned it to Texas, buried it 100 feet underground, and they'd sell chunks of ice to people to keep their stuff cold in an ice box. And he said, in 1928, somebody invents something called a Frigidaire. What do you think that does to your business model? All they sold was ice. So Uncle Johnny went on the dock and started talking to the customers. What are we going to do? You're going to buy one of those newfangled Frigidaire things. What would we do? And they said, we don't come here for the ice. We come here for the convenience. Where else are we going to get ice in Dallas, Texas? So Uncle Johnny went back to his family and said, hey, guys, we're not in the ice business. We're in the convenience business. Let's sell other things people need conveniently, bread, milk, eggs. And that's how literally 7-Eleven was born. They would have been out of business by 1929, but they adapted to change. They overcame their fear of change and adapted. So, dial forward, it's now 1991. Stores kind of looked like that one on the left. He said, Jim, the problem now is we're bankrupt. We kind of made a bad move with this financing deal, doing a leveraged buyout, but the store sales are down too. So your job, if you choose to say, is look all over the world for products people need more conveniently. So I did. We put ATMs in every store. Back then, you had to go to a bank for an ATM. Put them in every store. We started selling taquitos on a roller grill instead of just hot dogs. We put Budweiser beer in those aluminum cans that you see. We were the first to do that. We did prepaid phone. We did all kinds of new things conveniently, and we took our stores from 10 years of same-store sales decline to 10 years of same-store sales increases. Huge win. And then, for me personally, even though we were bankrupt, it turned into an opportunity. It turned into me having the privilege of being chief financial officer coming out of the bankruptcy. And trust me, I had one accounting class in grad school. I didn't know a debit from a credit at all. And I had to figure it out. Again, I had to learn. Thank goodness I had a good audit partner and controller to help me out and keep me out of trouble. And so it turned into personal opportunity. I became CFO, then chief operating officer, then CEO. I couldn't have done that in Procter & Gamble or Frito-Lay or other companies that were wildly successful. My career trajectory was actually helped by crisis, by change. And if I had left the company, as many people did, and as I was tempted to do, I probably wouldn't have had the privilege of those roles that I had at 7-Eleven by staying and keeping positivity through times of crisis. So it worked. So my lesson in all that is that change equals opportunity, that the role of the CEO, when I started writing this book called Education is Freedom, I tell a lot of these stories and I realized, people think CEO stands for Chief Executive Officer. Sounds very stuffy. It really stands for change equals opportunity, because if the CEO recognizes the power of change, that if you think about it, the beginning and end of all commerce starts with something changes. And someone responds to that change, and they're compensated. And then guess what happens? Somebody else comes in and changes more. And if they don't respond, if the initial player doesn't respond, they lose to the other person who created new change. So why are we so afraid of change? So I became somewhat fearless about change. I said, okay, I'm not going to see change as something bad. From the time I was a kid, I turned change into opportunity. And I'm still pretty young back then. I said, where can I go that a company needs change? Really, it's like stuck, and it's a company with an industry in transition. I thought, I'll go back to the oil industry. And nah, maybe not. That's too much change. No, I said, let's take on one even a bigger hairball. Let's go to Blockbuster. And I did. So in 2007, I was trying to take Blockbuster private. I had private equity firms knocking my door down to try to partner with me. Blockbuster was in trouble. They had a lot of debt. They didn't have a digital solution. Netflix had a DVD by mail, and by the way, I did not turn down Netflix. If you see that crazy thing online, they say, Netflix tried to sell themselves for $50 million. Well, that was in the year 2000, when Netflix stock, by the way, was 79 cents. So whenever someone says that we should have done that, I said, did you buy the stock at 79 cents? But that was way before me. By the time I got there, Netflix had a $1.7 billion market cap, way more value than they were worth, because we could do the same thing, and we're doing the same. So we created something called Total Access in our stores, where you could come to the store, you could get DVDs by mail like Netflix. You didn't like the one, you ordered Paul Blart Mall Cop for some crazy reason, and now you could exchange it for something you wanted to see instead. And the very first thing I did, I had an opportunity to partner with 5 of the 6 major studios who had created an entity called Movie Link. No one knows this story. Everybody forgets. But Movie Link was the first to stream not old movies like Netflix, new movies. They had 3,000 new releases already digitized and ready to stream. Problem was, in 2007, we were one notch above dial-ups with the you remember that? And Wi-Fi was a horrible experience, buffering. You really couldn't stream effectively yet. We knew it was coming, we didn't know when. So we acquired this product, we renamed it Blockbuster On Demand. So Blockbuster had a digital offering, far superior to Netflix. We had everything. We had DVDs by mail. We doubled earnings in 2008, ready to refinance the debt. And guess what happened? Everybody remember what happened in September of 2008? It was a flashback for me to 87, because Lehman Brothers collapsed. And when Lehman Brothers collapsed, the whole financial market worldwide shut down. We had to get our debt financed. We had it due in 2009. So we had at least $300 million of it due, and we couldn't get anybody to even talk to us about getting a refinancing done. So we virtually had no choice at that point. While I said change is good, even then I'm sitting there going, yeah, maybe change isn't so good. Maybe change isn't opportunity. But it turns out it was. Because what I ended up doing is I ran into Warren Buffett at Bill Gates' house. It sounds crazy, right? But I know. I tell you, I lead a charmed life. I've been very fortunate from that little 3-room shack. But I'm at Bill Gates' house going, whew, this is a pretty fancy shack. And Bezos was there, and all kinds of CEOs, and Warren Buffett's over getting some shrimp or something. And I walked over to Warren, shook his hand. He said, yeah, Jim, how you doing? He had been nice enough to send me one of his autobiography a couple years before. So I knew he knew me, but I was still, a little starstruck and a little shy. And he said, so what are you doing now? And I said, well, I did this Blockbuster thing. I'm getting the snot kicked out of me. I just had a half-page picture posted in the New York Post, full color. Headline, Blockbusted. Picture of me, Pinocchio nose. Not pretty. You don't want, when your buddies send you a picture of yourself with a Pinocchio nose in the press, it's not fun. It's not fun. That was hard. But I said to Warren, so I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I probably ought to leave. I don't know. I didn't start this mess. I'm getting blamed for it now. And he said, Jim, would you rather be on the bench watching somebody else do that? And I was like, it was like cold water to the face. It was like, whoa, no. Well, dust yourself off, get back at the plate. What are you afraid of? So here I am, Mr. I'm fearless, Mr. I can do anything. And I was being afraid because I too am human. So that little insecurity person on your shoulder was talking to me and I was listening. And it took Warren Buffett to shake that off my shoulder and get me back in the game. By staying in the game, I was working on strategic alternatives. So I had Google with a deal of the century. Streaming would not look like it would look today if Google followed through. We had a definitive agreement for the Blockbuster brand to be side by side with YouTube. Anything free, YouTube. Anything pay, Blockbuster. Old movies, new movies, TV, anything. Sweetheart deal. An article comes out in LA Times, Blockbuster is going to file. Google calls me up and says, deal's off. Damn. But I had a couple of other strategics, Korea Telecom, I had Dish Networks. Dish stayed in the game, helped us restructure the company, bought the company. We faced down Carl Icahn, went toe-to-toe, Southern District Court and bankruptcy court. He lost. He was trying to liquidate the company. We got it sold. Success. And I was able to save 19,000 jobs and let the brand live another day. Now, Dish ultimately decided to close the stores down for a whole host of other reasons. I'll come back another day, tell that story. But change does equal opportunity. And I did the right thing for the stores, for the people, and for the business. So what I've realized is that I can do this because I have a gift. And it's a gift that I've come to realize and I can share. So when I wrote the book, Education is Freedom, the name's a little wonky. It sounds like it's a book for kids. It's a book for everybody. And the idea is that education is freedom. Education gives us the ability to learn anything at any age and to pivot. And if we need to pivot to another career, if we personally need to pivot because something's happened in our family, we can use knowledge to eliminate fear and to move forward. So I learned that skill, but it takes more than just embracing change and recognize that change is an opportunity. It takes two other things that are critically important. Confidence, because we are humans, and we have a portion of our brain that triggers a fight or flight instinct, goes all the way back to our caveman days, when we're scared. And unfortunately, that behavior shows up in the boardroom. We've all seen it. What do you mean you're going to cut my budget? Yeah, come on. And people act irrationally. Or they flight. They become passive aggressive. Oh, sure, that's fine. And they don't intend to do a thing. Either of those behaviors are killers. Both personally, they'll ruin your career, or for a corporation, they'll cause inertia and the inability to move forward. So how do you build confidence? There's a couple of ways, but one, look at somebody like Tom Brady. Tom Brady calls preparation. And I know this week we've talked a lot about preparation. I have two examples for you. When Tom Brady wins a game, is he out celebrating and drinking with his buddies? He's back in the game room looking at tapes for next week so that he's prepared. When he walks on that field, his confidence comes from preparation because he is ready. Tiger Woods, I was at the Masters one day, and it was late. It was like dark, and I'm sitting outside having a beer outside one of the guest house right near the practice range, and out comes a guy with his clubs, and I'm like, what's this? And it's Tiger Woods. On Saturday night before Sunday, he was leading by like 5 strokes, but he was out there on the practice range at night in what? Preparation. And it's the same. So knowledge is all about preparation. How do we learn to overcome the problems that we face? And then finally, the third is clarity. So this is one of the bigger obstacles, because even if you've got an ability to embrace change and you've got the confidence to do something about it, then what do? We complicate the heck out of everything, right? Or in our minds, we've got it solved, but then we blah, 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 and nobody has an idea what we're talking about. You could have the best strategic plan in the world, and no one can execute it if they don't understand it. Einstein said if you can't explain something to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it well enough yourself. So simplification is key to being able to have this level of confidence and to be able to execute on these things. And it's clarity both inbound, listening. I know I'm guilty. Someone comes up and they start, hey, blah, 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 and I'm already formulating my answer. I haven't even listened to him. But I'm ready with an answer. So careful listening, inbound clarity, and then outbound clarity, communications. Those three things, change, confidence, clarity, I've discovered have been my gift. They've helped me navigate personal issues, professional issues, and I've taught these to my teams so that they too can have a whole corporate culture of embracing change and moving forward in a positive direction. It works. So if this seems so easy, right? Why don't people do it? Well, here's why. I could quote Ibn Rushd, an Andalusian philosopher, or I can quote Yoda. Which would you prefer? Yeah, Yoda, a lot more fun, right? Yoda was teaching Luke about the Force. And he said, Luke, and he actually used, I'm sure he got this from Rushd, who was an Andalusian philosopher, who said that ignorance leads to fear, and fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hatred or violence, and that's a cycle. We're in that cycle right now, if you look around. Very badly in that cycle. But there's a solution to that cycle. And Yoda said it best. He said, Luke, fear leads to the dark side. It leads to anger. It leads to hatred. The antidote is in your hands. It's the Force, which I think is a metaphor for faith. Doesn't matter what religion, what you believe, but faith, even in yourself, is an important element. And then knowledge is what takes away that fear. Because if I have knowledge, if I'm a kid and I'm scared of the dark, what do? I turn on the light. And the light makes me realize there's nothing to be afraid of. That is knowledge. Knowledge is what is in each of us, and it's the torch that we carry that keeps us from being afraid and illuminates the path for others so that they too can follow without fear. So there is a solution. And I know it sounds crazy simple, but I think we forget, because if we look out, as I said, outside of these walls and look at what's going on in society, we are a society that is paralyzed by fear. It could be fear of climate. It could be fear of the solutions to climate. It could be fear of immigration. It could be fear of any of the issues that we face are solvable if we come together as a people with knowledge and come up with solutions. And so that's why my book really transcended the original purpose, which was help young people realize that knowledge is the key to opportunity, show them the path. I realized that it's also critical for society. And I mentioned my buddy Buzz. I'm still blessed to be friends with him. We took him to dinner about 2 months ago in LA, he and his wife Anka. And he's just adorable. He is the coolest guy. His stories are amazing. He's a little out there, because he's had some issues with dementia and other things. He's 94 years old, but he's still in pretty good shape and just an amazing guy. Buzz and every astronaut friend I have, and I'm blessed to have a whole bunch of them from my work over the years, they come back from space with one interesting observation. They have an overview effect, and that's what this is intended to capture on the cover of my book. An overview effect, basically, they say when they're in space, and I see this, by the way, at 45,000 feet in my plane, especially when I'm alone and I'm looking at the horizon, I can just barely see the curvature of the Earth. You don't see borders. You don't see race. You don't see religions. You don't see wars. You don't see petty problems. That is what I call perspective. The ability to step back, and if every human could step back and look at the planet, climate would not be an issue. We would all go, oh my gosh, we got to do something. This is the most beautiful planet that is called home. So what can we do? Rather than fight about it out of fear. And so the opportunity is for us to replace perception, because when we're down here at ground level, that's when we get fear. And it's perception. You see something on the internet, what do? Angry. It must be true. It's on the internet. That's perception. Take a breath, step back, use knowledge, and gain perspective. If each of us can have the discipline to do those things, embrace change, have confidence, use clarity, and to use those tools, that gift that I said I'd share, to step back and replace perceptions, our perceptions, with knowledge that will give us a different perspective, then we personally, professionally, and as a society can do so much better. And that's my message. So I hope you too will share this message with others. And I've got some books out there that I'm happy to sign, or you can order them on Amazon, and I hope you'll find others that also need a little encouragement from this kind of message. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, yes, great.
Hi, thanks so much for the talk. It was fantastic. I'm curious, you talked about the advent of Apple Computer, and that's so amazing to be in that state. I feel like that a lot of young people are in that state now with generative AI. I just want to hear, curious to hear your just thoughts on generative AI and how it changes the knowledge and knowledge gap.
Yeah, it's funny. I get asked a lot. I'm getting a lot of interviews and a lot of, TV, radio, and they're going, what's wrong with these kids? Gen Z, they're a mess. They don't share our values. They sit at home. All they want to do is be on their device. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. And these news people are going, what do you mean that's good? That's horrible. Society's going to hell, blah, blah, blah. I go, no, you don't understand. They're just learning a different way than we learn. And I use an example. I had a video, those three things. Kid sticks a microphone in my face and says, what's the key to success? And I said, I'll give you a gift: change, confidence, clarity. And by the way, change equals opportunity. That thing went crazy viral. It got like 50 million views. And I use it as an example. I'm like, okay, we think the kids are just watching cat videos. I'm not talking about cats anymore. I can't use that. I got to stop using that example. Somebody's going to accuse me of eating them or something. Or dogs, yeah. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. But they're not. They're not just doing that. They may be, hopefully not eating them, but they may be, but they're learning. They're learning on the internet. They're learning from these devices. And maybe they're not learning the same way we learned, or maybe not at the pace. But here's why I like AI, because we are in this transition. We've transformed retail, we've transformed media, we've transformed commercial space with technology. We have not yet transformed our schools. We're still teaching and learning with blackboards and books the way we did 100 years ago when the industrialists like Rockefeller said we need a system to mass produce an educated workforce for the factories. And that's the system we have today. It's standardization by design. Now, what's AI able to do? AI can light up that classroom. Instead of a static picture of a frog being dissected, we can take somebody into an OR and allow them to watch and experience a live operation in biology class. Instead of a teacher standing, teaching the same way to everybody with a standardized process, one kid may have ADD, another kid may have dyslexia. AI will allow us to curate that lesson to the way the individual is learning best. So AI is no longer a handicap. ADD would no longer be a handicap. Dyslexia may no longer be a handicap because AI can correct for that, and people can learn. I call it human learning at the rate of machine learning if we're really good at it. All of this is coming. It's not going to happen the way we manage our schools today, state and local government. It worked 100 years ago. We're going to have to figure out a way to leverage scale of our public school system on a national basis and to use that scale, because I know scale. No mom and pop could ever compete with 7-Eleven because we could afford the technology because we had scale with 80,000 stores worldwide. We have the same scale with public school kids, so no charter school could ever invest in the technology that our public school system, if we do this right, if we step back and really, truly reinvent the way we teach and learn using technology. Sorry for the long answer. I'll keep them shorter.
There we go.
This was inspirational. Thank you very much. My question to you was, what do you think are the 3 biggest problems that humanity is now facing? And the second would be, what would you tell you to this 6 years old yourself now?
I would say that the single biggest problem with humanity is fear. It's unfortunately, sadly, our human instinct that lets us react negatively to change, and we're frozen in fear too often. Whole societies are, and so my advice to my 6-year-old self would be, you have nothing to be afraid of. And I don't want to get religious with you, but there's a beautiful comparison I've seen recently where I think Pope John Paul actually said this. He said there's 2 extremes. There's religion and there's reason. And too much religion without reason is fundamentalism. Too much reason without religion or faith is extremism, it's materialism, whatever. And he said, think of it as a bird. A bird needs 2 wings to fly. And it's that combination of having something to believe in and having reason that allows us to soar. And that's what I would tell my 6-year-old self, that you can learn anything. There is truly nothing to be afraid of if you have belief in yourself, a faith, and if you have the ability to learn and to use reason to solve virtually any problem. That's what I'd tell him. And I don't know how I figured that out as a 6-year-old. I am grateful that I've used that tool from the time I was a little kid. My nickname as a little kid, I'm going to tell this. Where's Alexa? My assistant's here. She'll laugh. My nickname was Smiley. I hated that, right? I'd go up to kids and go, don't call me Smiley. I'll beat you up with a smile on my face, right? But I did, in spite of all that junk I was going through as a kid, and I didn't tell you half the stories. I condemned the house, they did this, they did that, bad stuff. But I just had this sense that I'll get through this. And it worked. Thank you.
Test. Does it work? Can you hear me? Okay. I actually had it written down before. So what are some key strategies, maybe just a couple, do you believe are essential for a company to adapt and remain relevant in an evolving market?
Well, I do think that innovation is the lifeblood of companies, and we forget that. And you see it so often. Sears Roebuck. I'm old enough to remember the Sears Roebuck catalog before there were stores. I used to look for like cowboy outfits. That's why I knew I wanted to come to Texas. And then all of a sudden, Sears said, well, we have to build stores. And that was a good innovation for them. And then Walmart came in and said, well, we're going to innovate by using our scale to get a lower price. And they crushed Sears stores. And then Walmart bumped along. And guess what? Amazon came out and said, well, we're going to put in an electronic version of what? A catalog. That's all Amazon is. It's the old Sears catalog online, right? And so it's that constant innovation. Had Sears kept innovating, they would have, I think, been bigger than Amazon. Amazon never would have had a chance today. And Walmart had the chance to innovate on the electronic side, and they kind of bumbled through it, and they weren't good at the innovation piece. And I think that the obstacle to innovation is this internal fear, and I've seen it from the top. Organizations are horrible. The bigger the organization, I call it big corporation disease. The bigger the company, the more inertia, the more politics, the more fear. Somebody's going to take my job. Somebody's going to fire me. Somebody's going to do this to me, do that to me. And that permeates an organization and makes companies afraid to take chances, which is how innovation gets started.
Jim, you mentioned something earlier, you just played off of it. So, I have a 26-year-old that's still living with us. I can shout real loud without a microphone. Okay. All right. Including telling him to wash his feet. That's a whole nother story. So, you said something about knowing the Thompsons as well,
Yes.
right, in the history. So they had this, they were in the ice business. No, they weren't, right?
Right. They were in the
Right.
convenience business. Yeah.
So that to me is where everything that you've kind of identified from an operational all the way over to innovation. What business are you really in?
Exactly.
Is one of the biggest challenges that sometimes, and that then the second part of it is that you should be, unless you really are a widget, which is not a criticism. There are widgets that we need, and there's a lot of widget companies here. But part of what I'm sensing you're reconfirming for me is we need to think of things that are platforms and systems.
Exactly.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, like, when I was at MD Anderson, you think of that as a cancer research and patient delivery service. You know, we're there to conquer cancer, which means we would partner and collaborate with anybody.
Yeah.
So, from that perspective that you've just, hopefully, I'm saying it right.
Yes.
Right? Some of it deals with scale, some of it deals with strategic partners, and some of it gets over the fear of somebody saying, oh, we don't have that in-house, and therefore I can't do that because I'm going to give up my inside secrets. So can you tell us how at this stage you get to helping more platforms to emerge?
Sure. First of all, this idea that we'll hire a consultant to tell us how to do this, and I apologize to any consulting firms in the house. I had good use tactically of consultants, but for a consultant to come in and tell you what your business is, it's kind of like you're the one that should know that. So yeah, I think what happens is we put ourselves in a box because what worked yesterday defines that box, and we're afraid to get outside of it because we're afraid to mess up our success, right? I'll give you an example. I was at a limo drivers convention in San Diego last week, and they asked me to go speak about change, and they said, oh, these guys are depressed because Uber's crushed them. These are limo drivers, right? And Uber's just crushed the business, and they don't know what's going to happen, and they're all going to fold up shop and all that stuff. So I did a little homework, and I was shocked myself. I went back, and I looked at the number of 18-year-olds in 1970 with a driver's license. It was 88%. It was a rite of passage for me, and probably you, right? And then I looked at the number of 18-year-olds today with a driver's license. It's under 40%. It's like, holy cow. What is up with this? And it's because it's just a change, right? Kids find it easier to just grab an Uber. They don't have to mess with it. I don't want to have insurance, and the cars are expensive and all that. So they've just got a different way of doing things. Now, I showed that chart to the limo operators, and I said, you guys realize you're sitting on a wave of opportunity in 20 years as these kids mature and are still now growing up with picking up their phone and ordering up transportation. It's not all going to be Uber. Somebody's going to want a little finer and more security, a little more white glove service, and you guys are perfectly positioned. But you have to embrace technology and be able to find some way to get some scale, even if you collaborate with others to get it. And it was like, oh yeah. But it's exactly what you said. They saw their industry as limousine service. I said your industry is really convenient access to transportation. And in that context, they can have a whole new definition for their business, and now they're freed up to be able to innovate.
Thank you for the great speech. I want to go back to the beginning of the value of perseverance and persistence that you talked about. But on the other side, there's also value on knowing when to cut your losses and quit. How do you get the education and knowledge to know which one to pick at the time of the crisis?
That's very hard. That's a really hard question. Persistence and determination are essential. And by the way, if you do get a copy of the book, I've got a beautiful story in there about Warren Buffett. I mentioned he sent me a book. I have had a plaque on my desk since high school. I took it off a poster off the wall at McDonald's. It's a Calvin Coolidge quote about persistence and determination. You know, that talent is not what makes you successful. Genius is not, you know, blah, blah, blah. But talent, but persistence and determination are omnipotent. And I decoupaged. I took it to shop class and made a plaque, literally, as a picture of it in the book. And I've had it on my desk in high school, and every single job, it still sits in my office today on the desk. Warren Buffett sent me his autobiography. I'm flipping through it. He dedicated an entire chapter of his book to that one page, the Calvin Coolidge quote it's called Press On persistence and determination. And it's literally, it gave me the goosebumps because it's the same script that I have on my plaque. I don't know if he took it off the wall at McDonald's, if he ever worked there. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But there are those times that you hit the wall. I don't know. Should I quit or should I stay? And I've been at that point on a number of times. When it comes to me personally, my threshold is, am I still learning? So as bad as something might be, horrible boss, horrible company, horrible environment, macro trend, am I still learning? And as long as I'm learning, I can use that skill somewhere else. Even if I'm not making money and blah, 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 I'm still learning. That was my threshold to stay at 7-Eleven, even when times were tough. That was my threshold to stay at Blockbuster and press on. Now, there is, though, that time when you're not learning, and it may be a situation where you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you have to, fold them, as the song says. But I think I would say those are probably more rare, like very rare, because generally in any crisis, there is going to be an opportunity to learn. And Nelson Mandela has a quote that I use in the book. It's one of my favorite quotes. He said, "I never lose. I win or I learn." It's a beautiful quote if you think about it, because you truly do never lose. I learned more about business from my Blockbuster experience, as bad as it was, than 21 years at 7-Eleven. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. When Katie and I started talking through this week, I dropped the mic. When Katie and I first started talking through this week, Jim was one of the first people that listened to us and started, throwing out ideas. I think he wanted to make sure that he had females who were ready to do the hard things. The first ask that he had was, let's get the former first ladies together and have a chat. So he was always there and somebody who was helping us along the way. So not only giving us some time this afternoon to hear from you, but also just the time that he's given through all of this. So thank you so much again for all your help. We now want to do a little bit, we're going to spend a few minutes reflecting on the week. We have Fernando with Pendulum Productions. We have the American Energy Anthem that speaks to a little bit of what we wanted to do this week, who Houston is, who we are in terms of what we do for the world with energy. And Fernando heard the song and said, I want to perform this. I'm going to help perform this for you. But I also have another song that I think could be really impactful too. So he's going to do both. One is the American Energy Anthem, and one is called Forget the Borderlines. And it's kind of a nod to this component of we need to come together and we need to think about how we get stuff done. So Fernando, take it away.
Got to get the mic set up here. Can everyone hear me? All right. In the heart of a nation where dreams take their shape, Houston leads the charge in its energy cape. Across America's expanse, from sea to shining sea, we're united in our quest for energy efficacy. Strength, innovation. Across the USA, Houston stands proud, leading the way. From the fields to the cities, we unite. Together we ignite the energy capital, shining so bright. From the depths of Texas to America's sprawling lands, our energy ambition binds us hand in hand. Diverse voices join in this vital quest for a sustainable future. We're giving our best. Strength, innovation. Across the USA, Houston stands proud, leading the way. From the fields to the cities, we unite. Together we ignite the energy capital, shining so bright. Renewables rise and technologies advance. In Houston, we champion every energy chance. The spirit of America in Houston's guiding light. We're setting the standard, making the future bright. Strength, innovation across the USA. Houston stands proud, leading the way from the fields to the cities we unite. Together we ignite the energy capital, shining so bright. We're shining so bright. Thank you very much. That was the theme song. Thank you. Beautiful song. I want to just say thank you to Katie, thank you to Lindsay for having me, and Giuliano as well, and everyone here. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today, celebrating energy, which, it's something that connects all of us, not just those in the industry. So this next song is an original of mine, which with that theme of interconnectedness, talking about the fact, and I think it's very relevant to what Jim was saying about how connected we all are. So it's called Forget the Borderlines. Different shades of skin hide the same, they hide the same within. We're all a different shade, but we're made the same way. We are one. Around the world, many voices can be heard in foreign words, speaking all in foreign words. So many different words, but the meaning is the same. We are one. We are one. Stranger, I could be your brother. We could live a different life where we don't ever have to fight. So stranger, let me be your brother. Let me stand by your side. Forget the borderlines. Forget the borderlines. Different names, we pray to different names. In different ways, we tell it all in different ways. So many different ways, but the message is the same. We are one. We are one. Stranger, could be your brother. We could live a different life where we don't ever have to fight. So stranger, let me be your brother. Let me stand by your side. Forget the borderlines. Oh, stranger, I couldn't be your brother. We could live a different life where we don't ever have to fight. So stranger, let me be your brother. Let me stand by your side. Forget the borderlines. Forget the borderlines. Forget the borderlines. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fernando. We'll grab your mics. Oh, yeah. We'll drop this one. Thank you so much again, Fernando. Now, so we talk a little bit about, you know, the fear. It's Friday the 13th and facing our fears. And we asked Bill Shireman to come because he is an expert in making sure he sits in places where there is a lot of fear and what he can do to bring people together. So Bill is a part of EarthX, and we met him through some of our collaboration with EarthX. But Katie mentions that kind of Bill sits in places where he is going to catch the bullets that might be flying, whether that's through, you know, big corporations and other areas that are impacted. You know, he'll sit there and bring people to the table and catch those bullets. And so we've asked him to be here today to help us talk through some of the, you know, the hard things that come, and not just with the energy and climate, which we're talking about this week, but other areas that are impacted too. So we have representation from health and from sports and from community and from our partners up in New York who've been doing this for some time too. So I'm going to pass this over to Bill to talk a little bit about what he's doing and introduce the panel.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, Jim, for all of the work, and everybody here for all of the work that you're putting into Climate Week this week, and to this enterprise that we're all engaged in. Since the beginning of the modern environmental movement 54 years ago and change, the first Earth Day in 1970, we have been engaged in a war between the idealistic and idealized people, the citizenry, and the demonized business community, corporate community, often government as well. This war was justified at the beginning when, in fact, business was engaged in activities that were not sustainable, that had to change. The problem is that war is very, very profitable. War became a business model, not, fortunately, armed warfare in this case, but you can bet the profits from armed warfare are even higher. But these political wars, culture wars, that drove the media to focus on the negative and focus on triggering our fears. This is something that affected me early on. And I became, as a young kid, very concerned. I was very entrepreneurial myself, and I'd started some little businesses myself, so I had an understanding of entrepreneurship and how much of a passion it was for me. And yet, I saw that the impact of business was destroying the planet. And so I carried out protests against the big oil companies and organized students and so on. organize campaigns to solve problems. And as I went around the circle to the people that were supporting us and then to the people who were opposing us and so on, around the whole circle, I discovered I could never find my enemy. That each person in the circle, each institution in the circle, had an institutionalized reason to do what they were doing and couldn't do anything else, or others would take their place in the circle. And so I realized that we had to change the context of the circle. We had to get beneath that, and I became a peacemaker between the environmental activist community and the business community at that time, and now between a lot of different folks. My colleague Gleason Ryan here works with me at Future 500 to bring together corporations and activist groups. What we've found is that warfare is a natural attractor, that 6 million years of genetic natural engineering have conditioned us to look to fear first before we look to hope, because if something is endangering us, we'll lose our lives. So we have to look to that first, and then we have the opportunity to look to hope. We have contrived a media and political business model that only focuses on the fear, so that we are constantly fearful and constantly at war, and it never gives us time to experience the hope. Hope we need in abundance. We need about 3 times as much hope as fear, they say, to live a good, functional life. Why have I become so hopeful? I gained my hope in nature, in the rainforest, really. Decades ago, I worked between some major corporations and activist groups that were boycotting the companies for destroying rainforests. And I went to the rainforest to figure out how to save it using their power. And I came out of the rainforest realizing that the rainforest offered us a prescription for saving us, and that we simply needed to follow the principles that we saw at work in the rainforest. Now, every rainforest, every living system passes through 4 phases of development. The first, after an area is burned to the ground, as we're seeing happen in California now, because we're over fueling our fires. When an area is burned, the birth period is one in which thousands of seeds pop out of the ground, but the ones that take root and grow are those that are most energy intensive. They suck in the very most energy from the sun, they suck up the very most nutrients from the soil, and they grow very quickly, and they cover that area. But very soon, once they have covered that area, and the growth period, the physical growth period, has come to an end, they're just left to compete against themselves. But what they've done is to create myriad niches between them, places for diversity to thrive. And the rainforest moves from that phase of growth to a phase of development, of variation, of diversification. Every organism that was potential at that point of birth, those thousands of seeds, now can come up and find their place in all of the niches that are defined by all of the other niches. And the full expression of the potential that's held inside each of those seeds, each of those plants, is given a chance to flourish. My feeling is that we have fallen into a trap here of believing that physical growth is the only path to prosperity because it's worked so well for us. And Houston is a testimony to the hard work that it took to go through that growth phase and to fuel that growth phase. But if we can learn from nature, we know that the long-term sustainability of our culture and every culture is in now the diversification of the culture. We like to say that everybody is the same fundamentally. Well, we are fundamentally, break us down, and we're all those same subatomic particles, but we're arranged in different ways. And while we may be genetically 99.999% the same, we are 0.001% different. And that difference is magical. When you bring together the different capacities of individuals, not only do you get more, but you also get better. When you combine a person with one set of qualities with a person with a different set of qualities, you end up with a whole new release of quality. Just as an atom that connects to an atom, two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom come together. They don't show anything like water alone, but when they are connected together, they become water. The same is true with every individual that connects with every other individual. They not only are able to express themselves, but they're able to express a potential that lies between them. A potential that is always there waiting for us to discover it. And this is the culture that we can move into now. And Houston is in a position to lead the way, because Houston has wisely championed the idea of an ecosystem of energy choices. Not an industrial era choice between, well, we're gonna be completely oil and gas, or we're gonna be completely solar and wind. We're gonna be a wide variety, just like nature, a wide variety. Carbon capture over here, oil and gas over here, wind energy here, natural gas to balance that out. Different forms of energy, different places for energy. And we're going to have to put a price on carbon in order to rationalize that marketplace and make it happen, but that's the fastest way to get to sustainability. So I welcome all of you here, and I want to welcome the group of the panelists that we have coming up, who themselves represent a diversity of approaches to this that brings in sports, that brings in religion and spirituality, that brings in decarbonization and energy solutions, that brings solutions to the home as well as to industrial. And we're going to have a conversation about how these different approaches fit together into an energy ecosystem in which we don't have to sacrifice the prosperity that we've had, the material prosperity, but we may in fact choose that we just don't want as much material prosperity because this new emerging culture offers us an array of hope and satisfaction and fulfillment that more and more stuff never can fulfill. So, thank you again for being here, and let's bring up our conversationalists. All right. Well, we've had a couple of opportunities to get to know each other on Zoom, the way everybody meets these days. It's better than dating sites, I think. You know, you get to actually, you know, meet people face to face in a conversation. So it's good. Not that there will be any dating that comes out of this. I don't know. You never know. You never know. So we have with us Trevor Best, the CEO of Syzygy Plasmonics, which is engaged in deep decarbonization. We have Adam Lake, the head of engagement for North America, for the Climate Group, which has been a long-standing organization that began the Climate Week in New York City. We have Elizabeth Carlson, the CSO at Tricon Energy, who is engaged with the World Cup in 2026. And we have James Fisher, the director of the Office of Sustainability at the Houston Methodist Church. So quite a diversity of folks. Is that, did I get that right? Hospital. Just hospital. Okay, hospital. Well, that's kind of, you know, Houston Methodist. I just, you know, I'm not from here. I don't know these basic things. It just said Houston Methodist. I thought, you know, this guy's a Methodist, obviously. But I'll tell you, I have personal experience with the volume of waste that comes out of the hospital system. So I'll be interested to hear what happens with that waste. Okay, well, let's start with you then. Tell us about the church. And
yeah,
all right.
so Houston Methodist, we are an 8-entity hospital system across the Houston Metroplex. We have our newest location coming on in 2026 in Cypress. And we have over 32,000 employees, over 10 million square feet of property across the Houston Metroplex. And I was fortunate to come on board with Houston Methodist in 2017 to help launch our newest location in the Woodlands as Environmental Services Director and also Patient Transportation Director. And went on to launch our system Council of Directors for both groups. With that, through a series of events and initiatives in my role there, I was fortunate to find a pathway into sustainability and have launched our Office of Sustainability in January of 2023. And we're currently in process of baselining our emissions, running a lot of operational-based projects to look at how we can become more efficient and reduce our waste, and also looking at how we're engaging with our employees and the community.
So there is a tremendous amount of waste that comes from the hospital sector. I don't know what percentage it is, but I see it every day for reasons I'm not entirely pleased with. But volumes and volumes of high-value material that we throw away for obvious reasons, for sanitation and so on. Is there a solution to that? Is there a solution to that problem?
Yeah, there's been what's called a quiet sustainability movement in healthcare for some years now, especially around our central utility plants and our energy use in our buildings. And there's been other initiatives, such as our reusable sharps box. Previously, you'd have sharps that all of the needles would go into, would end up in the landfill. With the advent of these reusable programs, we're repurposing and reusing these boxes and reducing the amount of plastic that goes into landfills. But there's a lot of things there's a lot of promise and a lot of technology that's coming on board to support healthcare and our waste diversion. One of the programs that we launched in 2022 in the Woodlands is our food waste composting with Moonshot Composting. To date, we've diverted over 200,000 pounds of food waste at several of our hospitals. We continue to expand that program. Beyond that, I would say the biggest challenge is really post-consumer waste, specifically around plastics and also our regulated medical waste. With that, there's a lot of technology such as depolymerization, which Exxon has a plant that's coming on here in the next year that has a potential avenue to where we can treat that waste and then put it through the process to recycle back to a polymer. There's some other local startups that we met through Greentown Labs that looks to take some of that waste and turn it into graphene that can be used in items such as EV batteries or concrete, or even back into plastics in the aeronautics industry to be able to strengthen and lighten the infrastructure of the planes.
So nature recycles in a variety of different ways. I've been involved in recycling in what we've come to call mechanical recycling for decades. And there is a psychology and an ideology within the environmental community that only mechanical recycling is real recycling. That the kind of recycling that you're talking about, converting plastics, different kinds of plastics, back to their monomers and so on, and pushing them in, often to different products, is not real recycling. And yet in nature, you see, there's mechanical recycling, not very much, frankly, but there's also chemical recycling, biological recycling, and now we see sociological recycling as well. How do you view the kinds of recycling that the hospital system and the church, of course, are engaged in? So.
Yeah, I think there's always opportunity for growth. I think from a sustainability standpoint, it's just like in technology, you have your version 1.0 and you move to version 2.0 and you try to do things better consistently from year to year. And I think any amount of waste that we're able to divert from our landfills and to be reused in one form or fashion or another is a win. I think that we need to take that as a win. Looking to the future as we go, is that going to be an acceptable pathway? Maybe, maybe not. But with what we have and what we're doing, what we're able to do now, I think any avenue that increases the amount of diversion from our landfills is a win for sustainability.
I want to go to Trevor now and ask about deep decarbonization and what the potential is for deep decarbonization as a part of a broad energy ecosystem.
Absolutely. So, are we? There we go. Sorry about that. So to get started, I think it's good to, get an understanding of what syzygy does and how we fit in, and then we'll talk a little bit about the broader ecosystem. So syzygy is making a new type of chemical reactor. It is fundamentally different than every other chemical reactor on the planet. And to understand why this matters, it's good to think about, the foundations of human society. We need things like fertilizer to eat, fuel to get around, and chemicals go into literally every product you see in here and around you. Those are made in enormous refineries and chemical plants. Imagine the Houston Ship Channel. And at the heart of each one of those chemical plants is a huge chemical reactor that is powered by burning fuel. Syzygy's reactor is fundamentally different. Instead of being powered by burning fuel, we power our reactor with artificial light that's powered by renewable electricity. This was developed at Rice University, and it's really been kind of a honeymoon, moonshot type journey. Over the past 8 years, we've raised about $100 million, and we've worked with a number of the world's largest energy companies to bring this technology to market. So, how this fits into the broader energy ecosystem is in a number of ways. Right now, like we're running into some of the problems we were talking about with society, where economics and capitalism against the need to have a cleaner, better world. And what our technology does is bring new physics to market to help enable clean to also be cheap, which is absolutely critical. And so,
how do you do that? What's the, that's been a big challenge. And so looking at the technology, it seems like it would be quite expensive to me, just intuitively. How do you break that cost barrier?
Yeah, so it's really has to do with a fundamental change in physics. So two professors at Rice went down this rabbit hole of nanophotonics, which is how light and matter interacts at the atomic scales, and made a breakthrough, and they started making nanoparticles that were perfect light harvesters. In other words, basically all the light that went to it, it could absorb. Then in 2016, they said, what would happen if we decorated these with the traditional catalysts used in industry today? And when they did this, they got a breakthrough. The catalyst works about 30 times better than any other catalyst used in chemical plants or refineries today. And it's been really, really unprecedented, the kind of results that we're seeing.
So you're harnessing the capacities of physics, those catalysts, discovering the catalysts that can accelerate and reduce the costs of the process and bring it within economic viability.
The goal is cost parity.
Yeah. Tremendous.
And so, with that, we've actually worked with a number of groups within the Houston ecosystem. I've actually worked with the incubator in the Med Center to help bring other technologies about. And we've also worked with NASA in developing some of the aspects of our technology. So lots of collaborations across the ecosystem.
So there's a lot of folks in the environmental community also, and when I say this, I don't want to generalize, but in all of the ideological communities we have, the right, the left, MAGA, woke, environmentalist, corporate, and so on, there are generally a set of people who are highly ideological and very loud, and then there's a set of people who are kind of, in the middle, confused, as we all should be, because reality is not as clear as an ideology would tend to make it. And so I would say the majority of environmentalists, by a pretty significant margin, are very hopeful of decarbonization and carbon capture and its potential. But they are inside a community in which the loudest voices say, this is evil, this is a bad thing, this is going to perpetuate the petroleum economy. How do you maneuver? Do you face that challenge, and how do you maneuver through that?
That is an absolutely fascinating question, because born and raised in Midland, Texas, so I'm from energy country. Oil and gas is in my blood. Joined the energy industry here in Houston. I have always, tried to see all different sides. And when we first started the company, we were focused on decarbonizing a process called steam reforming, which is getting hydrogen from natural gas. We would have a lot of the ideological groups, basically spit on us because we were willing to work with fossil resources to help decarbonize. In that, there was a big push for completely fossil-free energy, and if you actually look at the clean tech industry right now, it's kind of taking it to the face because they didn't really understand the economics of going completely fossil-free. And so what we've been trying to do since the beginning is build a bridge. And what we do is, make space for both sides to be heard without shutting anyone down. And what we found is that the best solutions come about when the two different sides work together, and our technology can marry the energy rich nature of fossil, which sits on one side, with the clean aspects of renewable, which sits on another, to bring about a process that is both cheap and clean.
Beautiful.
And if you don't marry those two sides, you can't get to the best solution.
Beautiful, beautiful. So Elizabeth, I want to hear about Tricon Energy, and I also want to hear about the potential of Houston being the central focus of the world, of a few billion people in 2026 when we host the World Cup.
Yeah, well, I'll start with what I call my day job, which is leading sustainability for a chemical distribution trading company, one of the largest in the world. And I have to respond a little bit to say it's a little bit harder to decarbonize than what you just heard in the chemical space, because these new technologies, bio-based, recycled, whether it's pyrolysis, whether it's mechanical, very, 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 very small volume of the total consumption that we have right now. Growing extremely rapidly. I love saying that our sustainable products line is growing, by several 100%, by 2-3 folds, but that's because it's starting from here, right? And there's a huge cost gap. There's a huge cost gap. So I want to be realistic. We do hard things. It's very hard to make this transition towards industrial decarbonization. And that's something that, from the collaboration standpoint, we sit in the middle of the value chain. So we work with chemical manufacturers, and then we work with the consumers of those materials. So whether that's a packager or whether that's a further product, a brand, and so on. And we see our role in the middle, because I come from construction and engineering and oil and gas and mining in my background, and everything's asset heavy. So you can decarbonize an asset, but how do you decarbonize a value chain? And that's a totally different question, and it requires collaboration. And I'm going to pitch one point that I always say from the financing, which is that if you look at the end use of something you buy, like if I buy this notebook, studies are showing that you could decarbonize this notebook by 40% for maybe 2% of the cost. I'll pay 2% more for a decarbonized notebook, right? But how do you get that 2% down the value chain? And so those are the kind of problems that we have to solve collectively, is actually figure out new systems and new markets that will allow for this sort of financing to decarbonize a system as opposed to a particular asset. So that's my day job answer. But then if we come to the World Cup, people ask, well, how do you get from chemical distribution and trading to the World Cup? And the answer is what we were talking about with recycling and materials. We're headquartered in Houston. We're one of the largest privately held companies here in the city. And we feel a responsibility to Houston, right? This is the city that has allowed us to grow. We were founded in 1996. We've grown from a little shop to, again, one of the largest companies. And so we have an obligation to this city. What are we gonna do to support the growth and sustainability of the city? And we kept coming to this recycling question where we're only diverting 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% of our waste in the city with the leading minds on chemistry, engineering, material science, and energy. You know, if we can't do it in Houston, how do you expect any other city, any other town to do it? We have to change that. We have to create a model for Houston that's replicable in the rest of the world. Cool if Seattle can do it, cool if San Francisco can do it, but if Houston can't do it, forget the transition, right? And so we said, how can we do that? And it turns out my CEO is a huge soccer fan. He's from Spain. I was sitting next to a British guy, and they said, hey, the World Cup is coming to Houston in 2026. Can we use that? Can we make a difference? And like you said, it's billions of eyes on this city. For those who don't know, it's the largest sporting event in the world. Billions of people watch it. Probably hundreds of thousands of people will be here live watching it. We have 7 games in the summer of 2026. So the challenge is, can we come together, public sector, private sector, NGOs, activists, educational institutions, research, innovation, and can we, with the deadline of 2026, make a tangible change, move the needle on something on sustainability?
Yeah.
And so we brought that ecosystem together.
One of the lessons that I've learned that has had the biggest impact in transforming markets globally has been the power of consumer and retail brands. That when you have the support of a consumer and retail brand, they have the leverage to drive change through the entire global marketplace. Even one major retailer or consumer brand can have that kind of impact. Now, the World Cup is a place where consumer and retail brands are present and as visible as they can be, and yet extremely careful about how they treat their brand. What is the potential of a partnership between the people of Houston and their favorite consumer brands, a positive partnership that could leverage the power of those consumer brands to drive the kinds of changes that we need to happen?
Yeah, I mean, the first challenge is the limitations of commercial relationships in FIFA. But we do have the brands on board. We also have, you know, the local companies here. So I'm working with Coca-Cola, for example. I mean, they're a global sponsor. They're also a local sponsor of the World Cup. We're working with a lot of the oil and gas companies here. We're working with Houston Methodist as a sponsor of the World Cup. And so we're saying, how can we bring together everyone at the table? So yes, the consumer kind of brand facing companies have the leverage when it comes to direct communication with the consumer, but usually they have to take back the solutions to the value chain, you know, back to the packaging companies, back to the recyclers. And so you don't often have that whole value chain there at the table, but then you also need the public sector to be there to provide the regulatory support, to provide the frameworks. You need people to come together from the NGO side to put pressure on these companies, to put the sort of push behind it. So for us, we're looking at it less from how do we influence a brand, because the influence we can have on Coca-Cola is maybe a lot less than the influence we can have on the overall communication that the World Cup brings. So what we're trying to leverage is the 2 billion eyes that will be on Houston. How do we then become the communication, the storyteller to those 2 billion people or more? And so it's, to us, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Like, we as a city will probably never, at least in my career, have this opportunity again to tell the story of who we are. What is energy? What is sustainable energy? What is transformation of materials? And let's not forget nature. I mean, you talked about that, but how many people in the room know how many unique ecosystems are in Houston? I'm pointing to Lisa. Anyone guess? How many unique ecosystems do we have? 3 more? It's 9. Am I lying? It's okay. It's
12.
I heard 9, but yeah, 10. We'll go with 10. So within 60 miles of Houston, we have all of these unique ecosystems. So we actually can frame and reposition our city not as the concrete jungle or the oil and gas wells, but our city is actually a green city. We have some of the largest nature preserves. We have examples of carbon capture that's happening naturally, that's being sequestered in wetlands and in marine ecosystems, and it's all tied to the resilience, because our future in Houston, I was just having a conversation at lunch about insurance markets leaving Houston. Our future depends on us being able to preserve this natural ecosystem too.
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage you to look at a positive partnership relationship with the top 5 or 10 brands that are involved with FIFA, because often these companies, they face the same challenges that all of us do, where they take a step forward and then they're bashed in the head with a giant 2x8 and for taking a step and having it not lead to the finish line immediately. And the validation that they can get from NGOs and from citizens for the steps that they're taking is more valuable than anything that they can buy. They can't buy the kind of marketing that gives them that kind of credibility, but the people of Houston can give them that credibility. And so I would encourage you to look at that power that they have. Each one of these companies, Coca-Cola is a hero in water and water efficiency and in circular economy. Every company has its area, and they have their internal champions that are always involved in internal politics about how much the company can do in that area. And when we strengthen their hand inside by making it safer for the company to take their steps, they take more of those steps. So I would encourage people to really look
totally.
at that. What's that?
I don't know if I completely agree with that, because I think that, working inside from the corporate standpoint, you need the push sometimes. You need the oppositional voice. You need it. It allows us to sort of meet in the middle. You have people within your own company who are always, no matter where you work, who are always going to be holding back, holding to the past. And then you have people saying, we don't want any fossil energy, but they're pushing you in the other way. And so to me, it's great to be in the middle. I don't know, what do you think of that?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like, we got to work together. Like, that's how it works, is you get both sides to meet in the middle and compromise, and that almost always results in the best solution.
I think I see it a little bit differently from my experience, and I've been involved in battles, believe me, all my life, but particularly early on, and I see a problem with the focus on that. Where you need somebody who's going to be attacking, so that you end up in the middle. That is an important phase in the process to wake them up. But often when you're in the middle, you're compromising 50% each way. You're not getting the really insightful steps forward that happen when you can actually trust one another and work together. So yes, absolutely. But the world has plenty of incentives for battle, for public battle right now. We're not, there's not going to be a lack of attacks. To the extent that we can be voices of hope and bring people together against the market, tendency, I think that we find that there is much more, that we have many more allies. In any case, I'll stop speechifying because I want to hand it to Adam at the Climate Group, one of the long-term leaders in this, and really the folks who started Climate Week in New York City. Tell us a bit about your history and focus and where you see this movement going.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me here. It's my first time in Houston, and I'm having a wonderful time. So Climate Week NYC is the largest climate event of its kind in the world. It's our 16th year this year. We run it alongside the United Nations General Assembly. And Climate Group is the non-profit which runs it. And I joined in 2018 to run the 10th Climate Week. And then I ended up running 6 more of them, and I'm still there. And yeah, touching on some of the discussions that we had right now, that whole thing, I chuckled a bit when you were talking about the sponsorship piece, because it's like, Oh, yes, they can buy that. Absolutely. It's not money can't buy. Like, yes, they do. I mean, look at COP. Look at, you know, you go through layers and there's due diligence and things like that, but it is a fierce market. I think, you know, in 2018, it was enough for a CEO to go on stage and say, hi, my name's Bob, and I'm the CEO for blah-de-blah, and climate change is real. And everyone would clap, and it'd be, you know, oh my gosh, yeah, it's fantastic.
This is real, yeah.
That's just not good enough anymore. And then a few years later, it was like, you know, we are going to invest $50 million into X, Y, and Z, and then everyone would clap again. And again, that's not good enough anymore. Like, we need to see proper, solid implementation. We need to see complicated stuff. This is operational changes within companies, signed off at board level. That's the transition that we need to see. And the unfortunate thing that we have to deal with is that's so not sexy. Like, protesting in the streets or closing something down, that's a news story. You know, changing the code on the back end of something that saves you 20% of energy, nobody cares, but that's where the change is. So I think the challenge of what we try and do at Climate Week NYC is we wrap up sexy with the boring stuff, and that's sort of like how we try and push things forward.
Yeah. Well, you've had a good record of bringing together people from different communities, bringing corporations and activists together, and you have probably the most successful climate convergence of people around the issue of climate in New York City. What's been the effect? Have you seen that there's a positive effect, or is it just a feel-good week?
Oh, I mean, it definitely does. You know, I'll be completely honest on this one. I think raising awareness has very little impact in itself. It's a tool for other things. So I think the thing that I love to dine out on, my biggest sort of success at Climate Week is a few years ago, I teamed up with a fantastic comedy writer, and we took over all the late night TV shows. So like Jimmy Fallon, Steve Colbert, even James Corden when he was still over here. Sorry about him. And it was, you know, it was fantastic. Yeah. You got TV everywhere. They're literally like putting our website on. They've developed a whole show to Climate Week, and that's fantastic, and that's a real buzz.
Yeah.
But in itself, it changes nothing. And so where I see, but the reason why I put so much effort into doing that is because actually you get more CEOs who want to be part of Climate Week because their kids are like, why are you not doing something at Climate Week?
That's true.
The amount of times I've spoken to some of the biggest leading board members in the world.
Absolutely.
And when the camera's turned off, it's because their grandkids told them to do something that they've taken these things up. So there's a lot of influence there. And also, my goodness gracious me, competitiveness is brilliant. I've seen backstage when a leading CEO of a household name company has come out and given their speech, and they've given their facts and figures, and they're feeling really proud of themselves, and their comms team's there going, yeah, that's fantastic, you were brilliant. And then the next CEO comes out, and it's a bigger number. They're so angry. They're so angry.
Yeah.
And then they go to their sustainability team, and they're sort of saying, you know, like, how do we not know they're doing that? Why are we, you know? And that's where you get the push and the drive. So it's sort of human instincts, I think, that creates a lot of change. So that's how I think we mix up fun stuff with impact. They go hand in hand, but awareness in itself is meaningless.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. It has to be, you know, so Bill McKibben, famous environmentalist, once said, why are we using the word sustainability? And if somebody were to ask you, you know, how's your marriage, and you said, well, it's sustainable, you'd say like, oh, good, I'm glad it's sustainable. Don't we aspire for something higher than that? So, you know, I think we have to see the magic in this new phase of human development and the potential for it. It's not just barely surviving so that we can keep doing what we're doing right now. It's actually moving into a whole new phase and culture. And that's where I think the combination of conflict and hope, of fear and promise are so important, that the market drives the fear and it drives the conflict. And media profits from it, political industry profits from it, Even NGOs on both sides profit from it. One side takes a big action, and the other side, generates fundraising from that, and the war continues to build, and people become dependent on it. And in my experience, in California, for example, after running some campaigns that were anti-corporate to try to get recycling to happen in the state, I decided that I would start to reach out to my opponents, reached out to Bill Coors at Coors Brewing Company and at CEOs of various companies, reached out to the religious right head of the Retail Association, and made friends with them and basically said, we're going to be in battle again, but before we get into battle, is there anything we can do to make this more acceptable to you? And they had ideas, and they were pretty simple, basic ideas. And we were able to put those ideas together and get a law passed with their support that has now, as of a few weeks ago, recycled 500 billion cans and bottles from that positive interplay. So we probably needed to wake them up with the anti-campaign. But once they were awakened, then it was time to talk and work out a solution. And without that, we wouldn't have gotten that solution. So there is the potential to do that. And that's one of the reasons that at EarthX, when we met with Lindsay and with Katie this last April, we declared a coalition of the willing to declare a one-year ceasefire in the climate war. For those of us who are interested in working together across these bounds on a set of solutions, 10 marketplace solutions that can transform the global economy through a coalition of consumers, retail brands, and others in the process. So I would like to invite folks here to also, if you choose, be part of this ceasefire in the climate war for 1 year, and we will see and we will report at Houston Climate Week this next year what we're able to or not able to accomplish. So anyone that's interested in that, I think they can get in touch with you, Katie, and Lindsay and the team, and you can certainly get in touch with me, and we have a monthly Zoom call, which you're all invited to talk about these objectives and how we get to them, and to reinforce each other in hope, even though there are plenty of areas of difference that we have. How's our time doing here? Are we about? Beautiful. Questions? Yes.
That's a great question. From a laundry linen facilities, we have not. Our linen processor has a lot of technologies in place for water conservation and reuse and reprocessing. But and they also have a process for recycling a lot of the linens as they're rejected out at the end of life. That is a great opportunity for us to explore with that. I think there's a large, large opportunity to explore a lot of these other items. When we look across like medical devices, we have a lot of single-use medical devices. That is a huge impact on our waste and waste production. There are opportunities that we have through medical device reprocessing. There are companies like Cardinal and Medline who have their renewal programs that we participate in with that. And I think there's an opportunity to continue to expand on that and also look at how we're reducing within the hospital. So reducing the number of order sets. And that's something that we've been looking at from, not from a sustainability standpoint, but just from an operational standpoint. Is this really necessary? Are we ordering too many labs? Is there a way to quantify, and especially utilizing AI to help drive that, to know when best to put in the order or when to hold off on the order? All of that reduces the amount of resources that we utilize on a daily basis. Yeah, my pleasure.
There's been
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first I want to separate FIFA from what we're doing. So what you're talking about is the host committee and like myself, my company, et cetera, you know, we don't make any money. You know, the host committee spends $150 million of our taxpayers, we all are paying for the World Cup, right? We're paying for it. FIFA does not come in and give benefits to any of us. And that's the reality of how sports work. It's just like how businesses compete for, cities have to compete to get businesses to come. You have to compete to get the Olympics to come. You have to compete to get the World Cup to come. So that question of how the whole thing works, it's not the 1%, right? The people involved, and Lisa, I think, just stepped out, but actually the majority, you know, are not from companies in the coalition that's working on these World Cup plans. I spend my own time, you know, that I'm taking away from my families, the same as you. It's just because I care, you know, my company's not paying me to work on the World Cup, right? Like I work weekends on the World Cup, I work nights on the World Cup, I work very early in the morning because I care about Houston. Now I get to use my company's facilities and stuff to host, and that really helps, and my company is, you know, very generous in that sense. But most of the people participating in the World Cup effort are from nonprofits, local business, city, county, schools, universities, students. So the whole coalition is entirely volunteer. No one is profiting. No one is doing this because they're making money out of it. They're doing it because they love Houston and they want to make a difference. Now, if you look to other cities who are hosting the World Cup, they don't have the same structure because they're not trying to use the World Cup to make that impact. They're using the World Cup just in the stadium. You know, they're doing what they need to do. FIFA will come, they'll do their thing, and it'll go on. What we're saying is because 2 billion eyes will be on our city, people who love Houston and have time, because it's not going to be everybody. I mean, that's the reality. We are going to come together and we're going to put our efforts into this and volunteer just like you would for Kashmir Gardens, just like I would for the city. And the goal is to, yes, raise funds. So FIFA doesn't give us any money, but we're going to go out and try to get companies to give money, get the 1% to give money that we can then translate into mitigating heat islands in very environmental justice communities, or to creating microgrids that can be sustainable, or to improving composting opportunities so that your business has an opportunity to grow after the World Cup. We're actually looking at a microgrant program that can help businesses start to compost as an example, but we would fundraise for that. And raising awareness so that people understand. I love your service, by the way. I use it personally. I pay my $10 a month, so I highly recommend their composting service, but a lot of people don't know about it, right? People don't know that you can pay $10 a month if you live in a certain neighborhood, I should caveat that, to get your compost picked up at your door, super easy. If you don't compost, please start composting. But we want to use that 2 billion eyes to raise the opportunity. So completely understand it's not fair in the sense that not everyone has time to give input, but some people do have time. So let's leverage it. Let's try to make a difference. Maybe we'll fail. Maybe we won't actually do anything. But I personally am going to put everything I have into Houston until 2026. And frankly, if we fail, I'm moving. So that's how it is.
I think it is time to wrap. Is that right? So, woo! Yay. All right. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for a rich discussion. Keep the discussion going. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you to everybody with Houston Climate Week. I see a hand waving up here, and I always appreciate people that are determined to say what's needed to be said. So. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hmm.
I can take this one, and hey, I just want to note, human beings are human beings. Some of the, I mentioned, how some people in the renewables industry didn't like us. I've had even more in the fossil industry that didn't like us. I don't think it's, one is meaner than the other. I think that we have all become very polarized, and so you can't control others. The only person you can control is yourself. So bring your best self, and if the other person doesn't want to hear it, there's a lot of people out there working in renewables, and go find someone else. They aren't all great on either side, and if you want to get some introductions to some people who are really great to work with, I am happy to help facilitate, because we're here to make friends. Sometimes you end up doing business together. And if you go in to make friends and somebody's, pardon my language, being an asshole, probably not someone to be friends with or do business with. So yeah, if you love some great contacts in the industry, happy to help give them.
Can I just say, I'm just going to say one thing that I wanted to raise in the beginning, which is the best advice anyone ever gave to me. It's the 80-20 rule of everything in life, right? And so 80-20 rule with people and coalitions, like, in the World Cup, 80% of the time we have like great people, great engagement, and then you have 20% of the time people saying, we don't want to talk to industry because we're an NGO, or we're industry and we don't want to talk to the NGO. And someone, told me a long time ago, just ignore the 20%. Just ignore it, because otherwise you're going to be obsessed. Like, if you're a perfectionist like I am, you're going to be obsessed with how do you respond to that. Just ignore that 20%, and it's on all sides. To your point, I mean, it's unfortunate, but I take more the NGO side or the sustainability side, because I'm in industry, and I see how I sit in meetings and see industry just bash the nonprofit world and bash the renewable energy world and bash all of this, and it creates like a visceral reaction for me, because we don't need to do that. We can come together. So yeah, just it's every side, but ignore the 20%.
Can I just briefly come in from the non-profit side? Climate Week NYC brings together like 700 events. I'd say, like, also please understand like how damaged we feel sometimes too, because every year there'll be so many different partnerships or events that we either do or we don't do, and we get it from both sides. Like, I'm simultaneously a censor and telling people what they can and can't say, and also, greenwashing because X, Y, and Z is involved. And I really, really, really do believe that there is so much power in collaboration. I mean, just Katie organizing this event and asking me to come along is a great example of that. I met, I spend my life, I'm going to like exaggerate for effect here, but it feels like, I spend my life trying to close down oil and gas, and last night I'm at a party with like Exxon and Esso and others. I made a joke about it being the wedding crashes, but but these conversations and these collaborations are really important, because we're all people and want to do great things. And I think, like, you were talking about the ceasefire earlier on, I think the biggest battle is actually these days, it's not the environmental lobby fighting companies. The real battle is between the sustainability teams within the organization and the departments that won't let them do what they're going to do. And so I don't know if we want to call a ceasefire for that, but I think we need to give everyone a hand and give everyone a bit of a break.
With regard to that 80-20, if I want to understand a problem, I will look to the extreme that has some truth to it. If I will to the in that middle 70-80%. That's where you have the solutions. The extremes don't have the solutions typically. The middle has the solutions, and those are the folks.
One thing I would add, and I think this is this week from Dr. Bullard, the Bullard Center for Environmental Justice. He said, just because it's no today doesn't mean that it's no tomorrow. And I think that's a part of the resiliency and the message that we've heard today is that you may get knocked down, but get back up and still get out there and try to find that right person. Like you said, we've got the sustainability groups within the organizations. And from a healthcare perspective, we have the altruistic side of the work that we do, but then we also have the massive amounts of waste and energy that we consume. But with that, I have friends and family who work in oil and gas, and they work from the sustainability standpoint. And I think that there's always going to be someone with a connection. I think Houston and the diversity of the work that's being done here, there's always going to be that connection. And so just finding that right network and that right individual will help you to get to the right person.
Continue these conversations.
Okay, we're going to wrap, but before we wrap real quick, we want to ask all the volunteers. Volunteers, come on up. And we have some art that we brought from today's session. So the art is in the back, and we're bringing that. And we want to really recognize everybody. Want to thank all of our sponsors, and of course, we also want to let you know about Climate Week 2025. So over to you to talk about that.
So we started this year, first year, Climate Week, Energy and Climate Week 2024. We're looking towards 2025, and so Gallant, our partners from Gallant, put a little video together that I'll play that announces. So while we have the volunteers here, we're going to look a little bit about what we look for 2025.
Yes.
Houston showed the world how we do hard things. From innovative energy solutions to bold climate action, we've taken steps towards a sustainable future. In our labs, on our streets, and in our communities, we've made real progress. We united in purpose, shared in innovation, and strengthened our commitment to a bright tomorrow. But our work doesn't stop here. Let's keep the momentum going. Join us next year at Houston Energy and Climate Week 2025 as we continue to do hard things. For Houston, for the world.
So next year's theme is, ready? 1, 2, 3. Unstoppable. Oh, wait. That's it.
Thanks, guys.
You want to get a picture? Let's get a picture. Come on up.
Picture, picture. You
Picture. Picture. Come on. Let's go.
Come, everybody.
Thank you.
You heading out? You heading out?